She lost the first set 6-0. Then she lost the match. 7 months later, 10,000 people would pay to watch her play the same opponent again. Same scoreline waiting to happen. Same crowd noise, different country. Stay with me. Before every match, Alex Eala does the same thing. She stands at the baseline, bounces the ball exactly 3 times, and looks up, not at her opponent, not at the crowd. At nothing. A 1-second pause before the racket even moves. She's done it since she was 13 years old, on a cracked, painted-over basketball court in Quezon City, where there were no lines, no net judge, no crowd at all. Just her, a wall, and a habit she never broke, carried across an ocean, into academies and stadiums that court could never have prepared her for. That pause is the only quiet part of her game left. Everything else got faster. Toronto, August 5th. Sobe Stadium. Center court, the big one, the one that holds over 10,000 people, and it was not supposed to be hers. Tournament organizers had originally booked her for the grandstand, a 2,800-seat side court reserved for players still building a name, still earning the main stage 1 round at a time. Then the tickets sold out in half an hour. So they moved her to the main stage. Against a woman ranked outside the top 70, in the early rounds of a tournament, a scheduling decision so unusual that the tournament director admitted, on record, he had never seen a player ranked outside the top 5 draw that kind of demand before. Something was different about this match before it even started. You could hear it. Filipino flags in a Canadian stadium. Chants that weren't for the home country, echoing off a roof built for someone else's national anthem. And underneath all of it, a silence only she would have recognized, the specific private dread of standing across the net from the one player who had already beaten her once, in the worst possible way, on the biggest possible stage of her career so far. By January of that year, almost nobody outside the sport knew her name. Then came the run. Ranked 49th in the world at the start of the season, she began climbing in a way nobody had scheduled for, nobody had predicted, nobody outside her own team had bothered to write down. In July at Wimbledon, on the most famous grass court in the world, she walked out against the defending champion, Iga Swiatek, a 5-time Grand Slam winner, a name that alone could end most careers by comparison, and beat her in straight sets on center court. Not a set stolen. Not a scare late in a third. A clean, straight sets dismissal of a defending champion, on the lawn that made her name a global headline for the first time in her life. That result should have been the story of her season. It ended up being the warm-up. A few weeks later she landed in Washington and tore through the draw like a player twice her experience, twice her ranking, twice her resume. An Olympic champion, gone in straight sets. A defending champion at that event, sent home early, blindsided by a serve she hadn't scouted properly. A former world number 10, unable to find any answer for the pace coming back at her. Then Naomi Osaka, 4-time Grand Slam winner, a player who has beaten legends on every surface tennis offers, beaten in front of a crowd that had shown up specifically to watch it happen. The final, against world number 3 Jessica Pegula, didn't even finish on schedule. Rain suspended it mid-match and forced it into a second day, forced both players to sit overnight with the scoreline frozen in their heads. When it resumed, Eala closed it out 6-0 in the third set. Not survived it. Closed it out, clinically, like someone finishing a conversation they'd already decided the ending of. 21 years old, and by the end of that week she had become the first player, man or woman, from the Philippines to win a WTA singles title. Her ranking jumped from 49 to 20 in a matter of days. That was the peak. And then, almost immediately, the calendar handed her the one name that could put all of it in question. 7 months earlier in Melbourne, she had walked out for her first Grand Slam match as a professional. Court 6, packed with Filipino fans who had traveled internationally, on their own money, just to watch history happen live. And for one set, they got it. She took the opening set 6-0 against Alycia Parks, ranked 99th in the world at the time. It looked for a moment like a coronation. Like a debut that would be replayed for years. It wasn't. Parks has one of the fastest serves in the history of the WTA Tour, 129 miles an hour, a number she shares with Venus Williams and almost no one else in the sports record books. Once she found her rhythm, there was very little Eala could do about it. Second set gone, 6-3. Third set gone, 6-2. A first-ever Grand Slam appearance that started with a blowout in her favor, and ended in a loss so complete it erased the memory of how it had begun. There was no bad shot selection to point to. No injury, no excuse, nothing to blame but a gap in experience that only time could close. Just a 99th ranked player who served her way out of a hole, and a 21-year-old who had never faced anything like it before and had no answer prepared for it. That night, alone with a result that would follow her into every future draw against Parks, she posted a single photo of herself smiling, with a caption that read like she was talking herself into believing it, a reminder to be happy about living the dream, even on the days it comes wrapped around a loss. She didn't say anything else about it publicly for a long time. Here is the part almost nobody predicted. That loss didn't slow her down. It fed the exact run that followed it. Every player she beat on the way to Wimbledon and Washington, Swiatek, Zhang, Fernandez, Svitolina, Osaka, Pegula, she beat with a version of her serve that stayed lower, more disciplined, more controlled than the one Parks had picked apart in Melbourne. The worst match of her young career became, in hindsight, the blueprint for the next 6 months of it. She didn't get lucky in Washington. She got specific. She fixed exactly what had been exposed, in exactly the match that exposed it, quietly, without a press conference about it, without ever naming Parks as the reason. Which is why, by the time Toronto rolled around, this wasn't really a second-round match anymore. It was a referendum on everything that had happened since January. And it wasn't only Filipino fans watching from a distance anymore. Tournament staff started serving chicken adobo at the concession stands, for the first time in the event's history, because the demand from her supporters had become that specific, that organized, that large. The country's president released a public statement congratulating her, calling it yet another historic achievement for a nation still adjusting to having a tennis star at all. She was invited to a reception at the presidential palace in Manila, where crowds that once paid little attention to the sport now stayed up through the night, on the other side of the world, just to watch her play on a screen. A senior ticketing director for the tournament said the closest comparison he could think of, for this kind of hype around a Filipino athlete, was Manny Pacquiao, a boxer, not a tennis player, because tennis had simply never produced a moment like this before, not once in the sport's entire history in that country. Back home, local courts that used to sit empty for entire afternoons were suddenly fully booked weeks in advance. Clubs that had let their facilities go were upgrading them out of necessity. A country whose sporting identity had been built entirely around basketball, billiards, and boxing was now reorganizing itself, court by court, around a 21-year-old with a two-handed backhand and a habit of bouncing the ball 3 times before every point. That's the part that travels beyond the scoreline, beyond the sport entirely. Almost nobody watching had ever picked up a racket in their life. They weren't tuning in for tennis. They were tuning in because they knew personally what it felt like to be counted out early, to be told your country doesn't produce people like this, and to watch someone prove that wrong in real time, on a stage that was never built with you in mind. She walked out in Toronto not as the underdog from Melbourne, but as the woman who had just beaten a defending Grand Slam champion, an Olympic gold medalist, and 5 of the best players alive, inside a single month. And when the match against Parks finally started, there was no repeat of the collapse. Her serve stayed low the entire match, exactly the way it had all season. Her footwork stayed clean under pressure that would have rattled players with twice her experience. Point by point, the crowd got louder, and she got quieter. The good kind of quiet, the kind that comes from a player who already knows how this ends before it's finished ending. She closed it out in straight sets. The exact result Melbourne had denied her, delivered in front of a crowd chanting her name so loudly that opposing players later admitted, off the record, that it felt like an away match in their own tournament. Later that same night, no rest, no pause between matches, no time to sit with what had just happened, she walked back onto a different court for doubles, alongside a 7-time Grand Slam champion 25 years her senior, because Venus Williams had specifically requested her as a partner. Not the other way around. That should tell you something about how the sport now sees her. Not as a story anymore. As a peer. She is 21. 28 in the world rankings, and rising fast enough that the number will likely be outdated before this sentence finishes airing. The US Open starts August 30th, on a hard court, the exact surface where her serve has caused the most damage all season, the surface where Melbourne's lesson has been paying off in tournament after tournament. If the pattern from Wimbledon, Washington, and Toronto holds, the next name on this list won't belong to a warm-up event. It'll belong to a major on American soil, in front of the largest crowd she's ever played for. And somewhere behind all of it, underneath the ranking jumps and the presidential receptions and the adobo stands, is a 13-year-old who still, before every single point, bounces the ball 3 times and looks up at nothing. The last quiet habit left from a court in Quezon City that had no lines, no crowd, and no idea what it was training. 7 months ago, a 6-0 first set turned into the worst loss of her career. In Toronto, in front of 10,000 people who flew in just to watch her prove something, that exact same scoreline became the reason nobody doubted her again. If you're only finding out who Alex Eala is right now, you're already behind. Drop a comment with what you think happens at the US Open. In a few years when everyone knows this name, you'll want a record of when you knew first.